just that process. Like, how did you go from just looking at a very specialized function to a very generalized function? And if you want to share that with everybody, I don't know if you want to share your screen and show the code, or how you want to do that. But then I have, I, I know sort of what you're going to be stepping through as you show people what's going on, and your thought process as you and Angel move through that. And then I have a little training that I wanted to share with everybody just to give people an understanding of the context. I want to give everyone an overview of just some basic JavaScript, so objects. I also want to jump into the global object when you're doing web development in the browser, which is the window object. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the built-in classes like event target, node, element, document, and window, and then I want to talk just a little bit about events as well. So I have a decent amount of information I want to share with everybody just to provide context around what you did yesterday, Aditya, to kind of like create a little map of what you did, like the map surrounding what you did, so what you did is very clear to everybody. Um, but do you want to go ahead and share what you did first, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, I can share it like in a gist, but like then you can elaborate on it, explaining what exactly those concepts are.
Mm-hmm.
Have you started recording yet?
Yeah.
So let me know once you guys are able to see the screen. Okay, let me like just do this. Let me like keep it in different screens because it kind of blurs. So let me know once you're able to see the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's clear, right? It's not like blur or something.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So the thing which like me and Angel thought first is like it basically started building up over what like Jim taught us in the last the lecture before the last lecture, which is basically how to like set the style by fetching a particular tag ID. So I think this is something what Fernandez and I think the other Fernando and the other person did.
Dana.
So yeah, Dana. Sorry. So basically, this function we just kind of like this is something like the base function which like immediately will come up to fix that issue to solve that issue. But then you can see the way it is done is it basically fetches a particular ID, and then it basically then uses that ID, that div ID. So that div ID should be like a div element like this. So this ID, let's say it's volunteer page. So you can see this ID basically, this is what this div ID, this search page will have contained, this entire element. So this was like the thought process which Jim thought, and what we did was like if you see like the structure of the HTML, we kind of thought about using that structure. So for example, there is a particular pattern in HTML, in XML or in HTML. So basically, it's kind of like a nested structure. It's an order. So for example, the main tag is at the hierarchy. Under it, we have these tags, and this main tag is under body. So there is a structure. Like some tags are within a particular tag, or a list of tags are within a particular tag. So that's the structure. So me and Angel, we thought of using that structure. So like this, all these divs, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these 5 divs are within the main div. It is very easy to just see like through the HTML that these divs are within the main div, and these divs are not within any other div. These divs are independent to each other, but they are within the main div. So there is a structure. So what we did was we tried to just play with these values. So like the thought process went was like since these divs are within the main div, we could say that this main div contains a list of these divs. So that's like the thought process. This main div contains a list of these divs. So why not like try to just fetch the main div? Then we will get access to all these divs. We don't have to like go to every div. So that's what we did. What we did was we basically tried to fetch the main div. Ignore the children part. We just tried to get the main div. So what we did was we added an ID to the main. This wasn't there, so that we can fetch the div. So as soon as we added, we basically fetched that div, since it is this div is like the main div within which we have a list of divs. So you could call that these are its children. So this dot children is basically part of that document function. So like we didn't create this. So as soon as you do dot, like just do dot, it will give you like children. I'm not here because I didn't have that name, that the one which recommends you the function, but that you need to have that extension. But this basically will contain, so as soon as you see like get element by main page, that is get that main div, and then fetch all its children, that is all its inner divs. So that's what this thing is. This contains a list of all the divs. You could call it as a list of all the divs, all these files. So that's what this div is. Once now, like we can go with step. Now we know that we have all the divs. Now what we need to do is, as per the topic, as it was very clear in the issue, that we need to set the home div as block and all other divs as none. So it was very clear what we need to do. So since we know what we have a list, now what we need to go do is, we need to traverse through every div and just find whichever div has home, just set it to block, and if it is not this, if this ID is not there, that means set to none. Because if this ID is not there, then that means it is all these divs, because they don't have this ID. So like the only thing which we checked was like ignore this div ID. So this div ID means like basically like this volunteer search home. So now this for loop, this is a for loop basically which basically travels through every child. So var child div of main div children. So this child div will basically be every div. So we go to that div, let's say we go to the first div. Now the first div we basically set its child display. Now this is kind of like a ternary operator. It's very simple to understand. This question mark means this is the condition. So what the condition is, just see if that particular child div attribute ID is search home. That means this particular div. So if this ID is search home, that means it is this div. If it is not search home, that means it is all other divs, the rest of the divs. So that's the condition. Just check if that current div is volunteer search home. If it is volunteer search home, then set the child display value to block, or set the child display value to none. So this condition is basically like or. So if this is the condition, then question mark, or like question mark, set this value or this value. So this condition matches, then I'll set block. If this condition doesn't match, then I'll set none. So that way basically it will go through every div. It will go to the first div, this div. You can see it's search home. That means the condition matches. That means this div will set to block. That is activate the div, enable the div. You should see that. But let's say if the next div goes, yeah, this condition, so this is not search home. That means it will set it to none. Means you don't show it. Same with this div. It is not search home. It will set to none. Set to none. Set to none. That way it goes through every div. This for loop helps you to go through every div. Now that's what we did. Now this is the thought process which we came up. Then after creating this function, just like directly hard coding this search one, then we thought, like you can see that this function is almost would be same for all the divs. The only difference would be this ID. Like let's say in this place, this search home, if I change it to search page here, that means it will activate search page and rest all it will set none. So only this part is different. Rest all is the same to show a div ID and disable other div IDs. So what we thought of like creating a variable div ID. So this div ID basically will depend on what value you put here. For example, this is where you call the function. So I put search home. Instead of this, let's say if I put search page, this page or this tag, then it will show that div and it will disable all other divs. So that way, basically that's the logic. So now what you need to do is, let's say you have all these functions. So these functions would nothing be but this calling this function and putting the ID of that particular div, like whatever div you want to show. So we kind of generalize the function in such a way that you can just change the div ID of that div, and you can call that function and it will work the same the way it should work for that div ID in all the functions. So yeah.
Nice. And there's actually even a way to generalize it more, so you don't have to create those 4 functions with different strings passed into it. You can create an event and extract a value from the event wherever you clicked and pass that in as the div. So that's like the next step, but we'll see if we get into that. But yeah, this is good. This is a really good start into just generalizing the function. You know, if you went ahead and wrote out these 4 functions one by one, it would be the first function up at the top where you see where he did write the 4 lines of code, show volunteer list page, and then up above it, function to show home page, and then below it, those 3 functions to show the detailed page 1, 2, and 3. They would all have 4 lines of code, and they would all have those same exact 4 lines of code that you see. The only difference would be the string that's passed in to get element by ID. So literally, all of them would have the same exact code. And so what we would have done regardless was we don't want to repeat code. And if it comes to the point where we see that there are 5 functions that all have the same exact code except for 1 variable, we find a way to create 1 function with it and pass in that variable. And that's exactly what they did with the show div. They passed the div ID into the show div function, and they used that div ID to determine which one to show and which one to hide, essentially. So yeah, good job. I love it. Cool. So I'm gonna slow it way down, and I'm gonna like kind of get a bird's eye view over all of this, just to give everyone context of the web development world very quickly. So let's see. Let me go ahead and pull up this training I have here. I'm going to talk a little bit about just the window object and what is included in the window object, just to give you some context. But first, let me just open up this browser and let me inspect this page. And let me actually open up another one just about blank, which will just give me a blank page. So I have Google. I have just a blank page with about blank, and then I guess NFL.com or something. And we have NFL.com. And so if I go to the window, or if I go to the console for each one of these, and I type in window, you see this pop up here. Now this right here, the window, is what everything lives inside. And I'm going to clarify that a little bit, but let me go ahead and just type so you can see. I could type window here as well, and I get a window object. And if I come here, I could also type window, and I get a window object. Now, the window object contains everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything that you need to know about web development is inside of the window object. The more you understand the window object, listen very closely. The more you understand the window object, the properties that exist inside the window object, and the methods that exist inside of the window object, the better web developer you're going to be. That's just, it is the lay of the land. It is everything you are ever going to use in web development. Inside the window object, we have the JavaScript standard library. So let's just go to JavaScript standard library. So this is let me see, where do I guess if I'm going through JavaScript documentation, I'm using O'Reilly personally, so I'll show you what I use for this. I use JavaScript, the definitive guide, and 7th edition. And this is just literally everything. So like the structure of JavaScript, the types, values, expressions and operators, statements, so if else statements, conditionals, objects, arrays, functions, classes, modules, iterators, asynchronous JavaScript, JavaScript in web browsers. This is the standard library, essentially. This is like everything you could do in JavaScript. All the syntax, all the tools that are built into the language. That all lives inside the window object in the browser. The JavaScript language is inside the window object. So if I go ahead and I look at this window object, you can see things like, let's see. I guess as far as, let's just say, let this variable equal, this is going to be a string. I'm going to set this variable as a string. And then if I go ahead and type this variable, you can see I get back, I set it as this string and I get it back. So you can see that like this word let, this string that I created, this semicolon, this assignment operator, this identifier, that's JavaScript. That's the syntax, that's the language of JavaScript. And so I wouldn't be able to do this if JavaScript wasn't built into this library. I mean, into this window object. I could do it here too. Like let's say I say const this number equals 100. And then I go ahead and type this number. I get 100. So this const keyword, this is also JavaScript. This number here, number is a type in JavaScript. You got this equal sign as an assignment operator. The semicolon is, you know, this is JavaScript. This is the JavaScript language. The reason why the browser is able to understand JavaScript language is because of this window object that has JavaScript built into it. We also have event methods, which I'm going to get to at the end of this. Which is like everything is built on top of event objects. So you're going to understand why they say JavaScript is an event-driven language, because it's the ability to spark events on every element, every object is possible in the window. So all of the event objects are built into it, and you can see if I scroll down, like on blur, on cancel, on can play, on animation, where we have on click. I know that's what you used. So on double click, on click. So when Aditya clicked on a button and it triggered a function, that's because this is built into the window object. So you could say, hey, whenever you click on this element, run this code. And all these ones that start with on, these are all event methods. So you could spark events on a ton of different things. Like when I go ahead and just change this, that's on resize. So if I change the size of the window, you could trigger a function to execute some code when that happens. But there's tons of events. This is an event-driven language. You're going to learn a lot about that, especially if you move from web development to Node.js, which remains event-driven, whereas other languages are not event-driven. You have alerts and prompts. So if I go ahead and just do like alert, hey everybody, you see I get an alert here. So that's something built into it as well. We have the browser object model. So these are a couple really powerful tools that have been here since the beginning of JavaScript and web browsers. Essentially, the navigator, which is going to give you access to browser and operating system information. The screen, which is going to give you access to information about the screen. The location, which is going to give you info about the URL that's up here. History, which is going to give you information about where you've been and where you're going if you've already clicked back, and then local storage and session storage, which is you're able to store some information. You also have access to the document object model, So inside the window object, we have the document. We're going to be dealing a lot with the document in this boot camp. That's probably, we're going to be dealing with this every single time. As long as you have an HTML file here. Sorry. Let me just pull open the project. So as long as you have this HTML file, so if I go ahead and say like, I copy this and I put this into the browser, this HTML file that I just placed into the browser, that's the document. So you can see like the doc type at the top. This is because the browser is going to render this HTML and convert it into the document, and we're going to use the document a lot. We're going to go into that a little bit more in just a minute. Also, all the web APIs are built into the browser. So if I go to MDN web APIs, all of these are built into the browser as well. So if you want to do like, if you want to fetch data in the background, if you want to fetch data from an API, if you want to use the eyedropper API, if you want to use the clipboard, that's all in the browser. If you want to connect Bluetooth, if you want to do a barcode detection, like barcode detection with the application you're building, if you want to do, they have like VR stuff now built into it. URL API that just helps you parse the URL. Server sent events, so you could receive messages from external servers. Storage API, so you could store data. Like this is the juice. This is the juicy stuff when it comes to web development. Like this is all this stuff. This is built-in functionality that Google and Mozilla and Microsoft, they build into their browsers, and this is built-in functionality that you don't have to recreate. This is all built into the window object. So when you see this window object, it's all built into here. It's just waiting for you to turn the knobs and the buttons. So like imagine getting into your car and you have like your air conditioner, you have your steering wheel, you have the ignition. That's what all this stuff is. These are like levers and handles that allow you to control the browser. So the better you understand these APIs, the better you're going to be able to quote unquote drive your car. And what I mean by that is just build a fully functional website. Hold on. And then timers. The timers is just like if you want to wait a certain amount of time before you execute some code, like set timeout or set interval, so it happens like every 10 seconds something happens. You could do, I see a lot of websites where they're like, they don't want a pop-up to happen once you get to the website. They want to wait like, you know, a minute or something. So if I did set timeout, and then I pass the function in, and I say just console.log sign up for this deal or whatever. Actually, let me alert this. It will be more realistic. Alert, sign up for this deal, and then we want to do it after 10 seconds. This is going to happen in milliseconds. So we could go ahead, run this code. We're going to get this random return number. I don't even know what that is. But if you wait 10 seconds on this, you should see a pop-up show up. There we go. Sign up for this deal. So you could build stuff in. So it's like it doesn't happen once you land on the page, but it happens 60 seconds after you've been on the page or whatever. So all that is built into the window object. The window object you want to become very, very familiar with. We're going to be digging through the window object as we go through this boot camp, but I'm not really going to be like talking about it from a high level overview the way I'm talking about it right now. So it's something that I want you to always be thinking of, that no matter what we're doing it because this functionality exists inside the window object. So what is an object? Let me just go over to, let me talk a little bit about the JavaScript standard library and just talk about objects very quickly. I'll go back to Playground. And so in JavaScript, I'm just going to say let object1 equals object. And so I have this object, right? And if I go ahead and I console.log out this object, object1, and I run this code, you can see I have this object. But what if I build some properties into this object? So I have like property 1, I have this property, I also have property 2. Property 2 is going to be a number. So my first property is a string, my second property is a number, and I'll make one more property. I'll do property 3, and we'll just set it to true. So we have a string, we have a number, and we have a Boolean. 3 primitive types in JavaScript. And so I'll also go ahead and create a function called just print or something of that nature. And we'll just do console.log print. So if I print out this object, you can see that I built some functionality, I built some characteristics into the object, and I built some functionality into the object. So I have my property 1 that's a string, I have my property 2 that's a number, I have my property 3 that's a Boolean, and then I have my print method, which is a function. So what if I, instead of printing out my entire object, I print out just object property 1? What am I going to get? I'm going to get property 1. What if I print out property 2? I'm going to get 50, so I'm getting the value. What if I do print, object print? I should get print this message to the users, just so we could see the difference. Print this message to the users, and it returned undefined because I didn't return anything from this function. But if I just return 0, you'll see that this undefined becomes 0. So that's an object. An object is just a data structure that allows you to build more complex types. So we have our strings, we have our numbers, we have our Booleans, and objects are basically built up of strings, numbers, Booleans, functions, and other objects. So let's just say I have another property here called property 4, and property 4 is another object. So I could actually build another object into my object. And so we could say object 2 property 1 test. So if I go ahead and I do if I print out object 1 property 4 dot object, and you could see that it's already telling me here what exists on it. When I do just dot, it's going to show me what exists on it. And so if I go ahead and print that out, we're going to get test. So I'm getting the value here. So you can see that objects could be made up of strings, numbers, Booleans, more objects, functions, arrays. So just to give you an idea of objects, that's there. Now let me talk to you a little bit about the classes or the objects that exist in the browser. Let me ask you a question first, though. So if we're looking at google.com, we're looking at about blank, the window. We're looking at NFL.com, and we could look at the window. What's the difference between this Google website, this about blank website, and this NFL.com? Does anyone know the answer to that? Take a guess. What's the difference between these websites? Yes.
They just have different code in them, but they're all built on the same stuff.
Exactly. What else? What's the difference? What's one difference between these three websites? I want to hear a guess from everybody.
Like for example in the Google it's like in the empty one it's kind of like there are no kind of like div elements or HTML elements. But in the Google there are like less elements, but in the NFL website there's kind of like a lot of.
A lot of elements. Yep, exactly. Yeah, so if you really look at these three websites, the only real difference, and I'm oversimplifying this is the default window. This is the window object that I'm using Chrome. So this is the window object that Chrome built into the browser. This is untouched, default. This is just the window object that it comes with that they say, hey, here's your blank canvas, do something with it. This one here that Google created, this window object, the only difference is Google hired developers to manipulate and modify the window object. That's it. There are people who change the window object in a way that fits their needs. And same with this NFL. There are developers who came in and modified the window object. That's all they did. So that's the big difference between these three websites. Is someone changed the window object in Google and NFL.com, whereas this is just a default window object. Nobody has changed it. Nobody has added events. Nobody has added documents. Nobody has added functionality. Nobody's done anything to this window object yet. It's a blank slate. All right, so within the browser, there are some classes, and we're going to start with the event target. So let me go back to the code really quickly, and I just want to show you what a class looks like in JavaScript. A class is what you're using to create objects. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a class called EventTarget Dummy. And if you look here, you can see that this class has three methods built into it. So it has three pieces of functionality built into it: add event listener, remove event listener, and dispatch event. We'll just add event listener and remove for now. So I will say add event listener, and we'll just console.log and say event listener added, and then I'll go ahead and do remove event listener, and I'll just console.log event listener removed. So we have this functionality now in our event target dummy. So I could go ahead and I could create an object with this class. So let me go ahead and do that. I'll just say let or const event object equals new event target dummy, and now I have an instance of this class. So if I run event object dot add event listener, so if I run this method event object dot add event listener, then this should print event listener added to the console. So let's try this out. Event listener added. So you can see that with this class, I could build functionality, I could build even properties into my class, but this event target that we use in the browser, it's literally built into every element we're using, and I'm going to give you more information about that soon. But so we have our event target dummy, our event target class. We use this class to create an instance of this object, and every instance of this is going to have these two methods built into it. So if I go ahead and do const event object 2. This is another instance, so I could create multiple different versions of this event target dummy. In the same way that I could run these methods on the event object 1, I could also run them on event object 2. Every instance, I might have 1,000 instances of this class. I only have to build the class one time, but I could go and create instances. I could create 10 of them, 1,000, 1,000,000, however many I need. But the class is more like a blueprint for the objects I want to create. So if I go ahead and run that again, you're going to see event listener added, event listener removed, but these are actually two different objects here. So I want to show you a concept just called prototypal inheritance. So, yes.
Explain what an event listener is.
Yeah, that's I'm going to explain that a little bit more for sure. Yeah. So for now, just keep in mind that it is some functionality that's added to an object. Right now, the only functionality is printing, but it actually does more in the browser. So we have this event dummy, and I want to create a different class. Like I want to create multiple classes that all use this functionality. And if we look here, there are two specifically that receive this functionality from the event target. There's a node class and there's the window class. So the node class is going to contain this same functionality that the event target contains. So it's going to have all of these here built into its blueprint, but it's also going to inherit these properties from the event target. And same with the window object or the window class. It's going to have all this custom stuff that's only built into the window, that only the window object has access to, but it's also going to have these methods that were built into the event target. And so if I want to go ahead and create a class called node, but I want this functionality to also be built into every single node I create, I use the extends keyword, and I extend event target dummy. And here, I'm going to create a constructor. Don't worry about these details right now. I'll explain them for sure. And if you look at this node, we have like child nodes, we have parent node, we have first child, last child. So I'm going to go ahead and create child nodes. And we'll just say this dot child nodes equals, we'll just say an array for now. And we'll just say node 1, node 2, node 3. And then we'll create a couple more. We'll create first child and last child. So this dot first child equals node 1. And this dot last child equals node 3. Because when we create a node, if it has a child nodes array of 1, 2, and 3, so the node that we're creating has 3 nodes inside of it, its first child is going to be node 1, the first one, and its last child is going to be the last one. And so where Aditya shared his code where he's like, hey, the main element that I created, I know that that's just a node. And I know that inside of that object, the main element, there are 4 divs. And each one of those divs that were inside of the main element that he created. So if we're looking at like, I guess I recreated something here, but let's just say he has his main, and inside he had his divs. you would look at this main as the node, which it is a node, and then you'd look at each one of these divs as one of the child nodes. And so you're able to access these divs by doing document dot get element by ID. And if we have this ID equals main, and we access that main, and we store it inside just main element. Now we have access to this main node here, and we're able to access the children by saying main dot children or main dot node list, which is going to contain all of the nodes that live within the main as well. There's always like several ways to do everything in here, but you'll see as we go on. So yeah, so we have our node here that we are taking the functionality that lives inside of event dummy. We want to take this functionality and we want every node we create to have this functionality without having to say anything about the event target. And so if I go ahead down here and I say new node 1 equals new node, and then I console.log new node 1, then you should see my node. And you can see my node contains its child nodes. It contains a first node, a last child, and when you're looking at the browser, when you're thinking about an HTML document of elements, every element in the HTML document is essentially a node. And so every element, whether it's the main or a div or an image or anything, it's going to have these properties on it. You're going to be able to do whatever the node is, dot child nodes, dot parent node, dot next sibling. You're going to be able to target different HTML elements with these properties. You're also going to be able to run certain methods on it with this. And same thing with the window. If I go ahead and do like window.document, so let me come here and do like window.document, then you can see we have our document. It'll actually show us our document. Let me go over here to the Google one and do window.document. You can see we get our document, but this document is obviously more detailed. Couple scripts in here, some style sheets, that sort of thing. And if I do window.document here, same thing. So the window object is also going to have properties that only the window object has access to. It's going to have the document, the location, history, and these properties are properties that only the window object have. And then it also has methods that only the window object has. And then, so this event target is like passing its prototype to node. So node not only has the properties and the methods that are built into the node class, but it also has the ones that were built into event target, and same with window. So I could do like window.addEventListener, and I could do, you're passing a type and a function. So with window, there's specific events that you could run on the window that you can't run anywhere else, like on load, for example. So I could do window.addEventListener, replace type with on load, and then on load set a timeout where I want an alert to pop up, but I don't want that 10-second counter to start until the page loads, for example. And then the node prototype passes all of these properties and all of these methods to both document and to element. So element has all of the properties built into element, and you've seen ID, class name, class list. You could see its properties start becoming more focused and more similar to the ones that we've seen so far and used so far, because we're talking about elements that live within a document at this point. Very similar to like children. This is the one Aditya and Angel used. And then also some methods that only the element class have access to. So it has all these properties and methods, but it also has all these properties and methods, and it also has all these methods. So every element also has an event listener, a remove event listener. And same with document. Document has properties that only document has. You could access the body directly, the head directly. You could change or access the title and a bunch of other stuff. And it also has some methods like, we haven't used create element, but it's popular one. We used get element by ID. These are other ways that you could get elements. And then not only does it have these properties and these methods, but it has the properties and the methods from the node, and it also has the methods from the event target. And then last but not least, we have our HTML element. And this is a lot of view type properties, scrolling, seeing where things are located in the window, that sort of thing. And then also a couple methods. And these properties and these methods are unique to the HTML element. But on top of these properties and these methods, every HTML element object also has all of these properties and methods, also has all of these properties and methods, and also has all of these methods. So you can see how many properties and methods an HTML element actually have. A lot. So there's a lot of different things you could do with an HTML element object. But the main thing I'm trying to get across to you is that everything is built from the event target. Almost everything has an event listener functionality built into it. So remember this, that you could literally create an event on anything for the most part. And that's like the crux of JavaScript. And then just to give you a couple object specific events. So like on the window, if you did like window add event listener, this is like to answer your question a little bit, Dana, like what is an event listener? So when I run window.add event listener, I could pass in load, on resize, on scroll. So if I'm in my browser and I just landed on the page and it loads, once it loads, the event would trigger, the function would trigger. Same with like resize. So if I'm in the window and I'm resizing it, I could have a function execute on resize. So when I resize it, same with like on scroll, for example, if I scroll, that scroll will trigger the event. The document is limited as far as events. HTML element, you can have it pay attention for when you're submitting a form, for like media events, when you start playing audio or pausing or ending audio. For example, like you could start an animation when you start playing an audio or something. And then input events, and then for elements, which also HTML elements would have as well, there are mouse events like click, double click, mouse down, focus events. So when you click on something, that would be focused. When you click on something else, that would blur whatever was previously focused. Keyboard events, so like pressing down. Form events, touch events for like touchpads, drag and drop events if you have interactive websites, and animation events. So there's tons of different things we could do with events. And I'm actually going to have a day specifically where we could just kind of get used to events and build a couple events on a couple different elements. But let me see what we got here. Yeah. yeah, so that's some context, and I don't expect everyone to grasp all of this all at once. This is just, I wanted to kind of like just stretch your minds a little bit to show everybody the map, essentially. So when we go back to Aditya's code, I could actually go to the main HTML I have here, which sort of resembles Aditya's code. I want to kind of circle back to that functionality you had. So if you look at this code, you can see I have the nav. The nav is up here, and the nav is a node object. It's also an element object. It's also an HTML element object. Inside of the nav, we have children. We have 5 children. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. And inside they have some text. So you could also see that I have a main, and my main also contains 5. So I have my first div, my second, my third, my fourth, my fifth. And then these are initially set to display none. This one is shown. And so I actually put an event listener in my code just to show you a little bit about it. And so I have a similar function called showDiv. I'm passing the event into showDiv, which is this here. So the first thing I do when I execute this function is I target this main element. So I'm running document.getElementById main, and I'm passing in the main ID. So if we look at our document, we find the element that has an ID of main. And if we come back here, if we come back here, you can see getElementById is one of our methods here on the document. I use that to target an element. And then for each child, you can see with main.children, let me just console.log main.children so you can see what I'm actually targeting here. So this should show up in the console because I'm logging it to the console. So when I click one of these, you can see. Actually, this is happening 5 times each time. So you can see main.children is a collection, an HTML collection. It's an array that contains 5 divs. Our first, our second, our third, our fourth, and our fifth. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 0 is our first div. 1 is our second div. So it's just an array that contains these things, these elements. And so for each one of these elements, because 0 would be child, 1 would be child, 2 would be child. So for each one of them, we are going to take the ID off of the child. So I'm basically extracting this ID from each one of the children as we process them one by one. And if the ID equals the text content of the event target, and the event target is just the button I'm clicking. Because if I click on fifth, an event is happening on this here. And since it's happening on this here, I'm going to receive, this is the target, and the text content of the target is fifth with a capital F. So since it's fifth with a capital F, I had to do 2 lowercase. Otherwise, none of them would have matched the ID because all my IDs are lowercase. And so if the child ID matches the text that's inside of the button, then I set the div to block. And if it doesn't match, then I set the div to none. So I'm setting every div. When I run this show div function, I'm setting every single div every time I run this function. The only thing I'm checking for is that I'm checking if the text from the button I click, so let's just say I click third, I'm going to check this one first. Does the lowercase of third match first? No. So I'm going to set this one to display none. Does the ID second match the lowercase of third? No. So I'm going to set this to this display to none. Then I'm on the third child. Does the ID third equal the lowercase version of this third? Yes. So I'm going to set this expression evaluates to true, because now the child ID is third. The target, the text content of the button I clicked was third. Change it to lowercase, so it sets it to block. And then it continues moving through the child list. This one's fourth, it doesn't match third, so it sets it to none. This one's fifth, it doesn't match third, so it sets it to none. And then what I did here was I just added an event listener to the document. So anytime you clicked, you execute this function. And when you execute this function, you get an event object. So if I click, anytime an event happens, you get an event object, and the event object is also another object that has like a ton of information on it that you could use to manipulate the DOM or make checks and that sort of thing. So this was a lot. But it's our Friday, basically. I look at Thursday as our Friday, so we won't like get into any code. We'll kind of just unwind a little bit, chat about it, discuss where we're going to be going with next week and all that stuff. But yeah, so that's that for now. Hopefully that clarified a few things.
Jim?
Yes.
I realize now, that is actually doing pretty much the same thing as what document query selector would be doing. It's actually a built-in function that just goes through all the child.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
it goes through the entire page, so we might be actually to make this even better with now that I know that the query selector exists.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yep.
I learned a lot today. Cool.
Awesome. Good. And then I'm going to go ahead and post this as well, so if anyone wants to review and ask questions and all that stuff. Tiffany, I saw that you sent a message. What's going on? Was it concerning this here?
Yes, I was wondering, I was trying to, I had missed something. You went for a page called O'Reilly.
Yes.
Can you put that in the chat?
Yes. It's actually, I believe they'll give you like a 10-day free trial or something like that, but besides that, it's like $50 a month, but it's worth it, I think.
Okay.
It's so worth it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I was wondering if you were available like on Saturday or Sunday, so I can go over where I have missed during the week. If we could do like a private, if you're not too busy on Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah, we can make something work. I'll also forward you the videos of the sessions from yesterday and the day before, so you have that too.
Sounds good. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and
I'm actually in class right now. I'm in my school class, and I'm multitasking back and forth. So I'm listening to you, and I'm listening to him also.
wow, that's a lot to absorb. That's
So,
fun.
I'm coding with him, and then I'm listening to you at the same time. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.